everybody, and welcome to WCNC Charlotte's Off the Clock with Carboni podcast. I'm your host, WCNC Sports Director Nick Carboni. You can see me reporting on Charlotte sports Monday through Friday at 6 and 11 right here on WCNC Charlotte, and of course after Sunday Night Football. So this is our weekly podcast, and we talk to somebody who has a great Charlotte sports story or has great perspective on our local sports teams. And this week is no different. We're doing it a little earlier in the week because we have got to talk about this Charlotte Hornets basketball team. So much excitement with Gordon Hayward and Lamelo Ball, and to do that, a great voice on the Charlotte Hornets beat who was unfortunately absent from that beat for a great period of time. That's Rod Boone, formerly of The Athletic, and now he's got his own Charlotte Hornets-based newsletter. I'm a subscriber. It's called The Boondocks. You definitely got to check that out. And we're going to break down the roster, talk about expectations and predictions for this season, and maybe what the Hornets' next big move is and what that move will be. So enjoy our podcast with Rod Boone. All right, Rod, tell me about the Boondocks. I've enjoyed your newsletter so far. How did this idea come about, and what's your plan for it?
Well, really, it came about from my family, friends, and the fans. I guess the Fs. They all kind of have been kind of at me and saying, you know what? Okay, The Athletic laid you off back in June, and obviously those were tough times, and things haven't changed since then. But they feel like there was like something missing in this market with this audience, with the fans. So I just kind of just went at it, man. And I've been thinking about doing it for a while. I wanted to wait till the right time came to launch it, because you don't want to launch something and people aren't paying attention. So I felt if I was going to do it, I had to wait till the right moment. The way the calendar of the NBA kind of stacked up, it kind of came really fast. You had the draft, then you had essentially free agency. And then from there, you had schedule release, preseason, and training camp. So I figured with things kind of happening the way they were in December, it's kind of important probably to kind of just start it up right around then. So, and then when they got Gordon Hayward to add to Lamelo Ball, I figured it definitely was time, because the fans want to read about both of those guys.
Yeah, and it's great to have you back on the beat, and we were talking about it like, I'm as much of a consumer, maybe more of a consumer than a producer of this stuff. Like, I love all the coverage I can get of the team that I also cover, and you provide such a good voice and perspective. I'm glad you're back, and I know that's shared by a lot of folks. So how often will you put stuff out? I mean, how do people subscribe? I've subscribed, and every couple days I'll get an email, and it's basically boom, it's your newsletter.
What happens is you can subscribe by just going to the website, which is basically theboondocks.substack.com. And essentially you can type in your email address. Whenever I publish something, it'll come right to your inbox right away, like momentarily. So if I press the button at 12:01, at 12:01 in 5 seconds, your email inbox has essentially what I just wrote. So my plan is to kind of just give people content when it's time. Like, I haven't got an exact time frame just yet, so I'm going to post 5 times a week or 4 times a week, but I feel like right now, at least twice a week minimum, 3 times a week probably. Season's going to start next week, as we know. So at that point, we'll have games almost every other day. So we'll depend on just the news curve, what's happening. But I just want to just feed people's appetite for content, because right now, as we talked about, man, the Hornets are one of those teams that are kind of young and upcoming. And the fans here are excited for the first time in like years. Yeah. So to be able to have something to kind of give them and feed the appetite is what I want to do. So I give them at least probably twice a week right now. We'll up it as we kind of get going here.
All right. So the regular season approaches. It's been 9 months since this team has played a regular season game, Rod. They've got 2 key additions with Gordon Hayward and Lamelo Ball. Just the shortest preseason you could ever imagine. I mean, I knew it would be condensed, but here it is. So what's like the realistic expectation for the beginning of this season? Maybe like a month or so.
That's a great question. I think you just have to temper expectations right now with these guys, because if you go all out, with a young team, like I said, they haven't had much time to practice together, to be together. James Borrego, as we know, hasn't put in much of his offense just yet. He's installed a couple of things here or there, but he's been more about concept so far. He's been concept driven, because he knows you can't flood the guys' brains right now with just too much information. You have to be able to kind of get them in shape first and have them know where you want them to be on offense and defense. That's the first thing. So it will take a while to kind of see them come together because, again, with a young team, 2 major new pieces, although they have a lot of players back from last year, I think 84% of the minutes played last year returned this year. But when you bring in Lamelo and Gordon Hayward, those are 2 playmaking guys. They have to be able to figure out where the teammates like the ball on the floor, things of that nature. So it's going to take a while to actually see them reach the potential. But I give them to at least February or so to kind of see them click a little bit out there on the floor.
Okay, so like Coach Borrego hasn't said playoffs. Mitch Kupchak didn't come out right and say playoffs. A couple of players have, but I mean, just given what they've done, I mean, reading between the lines, like that's certainly the expectation here in year 3 of James Borrego with the addition of Hayward and Lamelo.
I agree, because if you think about it, the last couple of years, they've been right there. In year 1 of James Borrego's tenure here, you still had Kemba. They were within a game of the playoff hunt, lost to Orlando last game of the year, and kind of couldn't get in. Then last year, let's be honest, they lost Kemba. They had a really young team, didn't have much expectations. And come March, before this whole thing got shut down with the COVID and pandemic, essentially they were in 9th place, kind of almost like right there in the conference race. So they're one of those guys, those teams that you can tell just need a couple of more pieces. And now they have this couple of more pieces. They should give them at least, maybe you would think, 2 or 3 or 4 more wins. And if that happens, they're right there for that 8th playoff spot. So at minimum, this whole playing tournament thing coming in this year, they should at least be in the mix for at least minimum of that, at least the number 8 seed in my mind, to kind of just get to the playoffs for the first time in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, so let's talk about Lamelo, Rod, because this is a heck of a time to start a fan newsletter, because this kid just pulls in clicks. Are you surprised about how much traction, news, anything about LaMelo Ball gets?
I am, because we obviously know that the Ball family is out there in terms of publicity. We know that LeVar Ball, their dad, he was out front years ago before Alonzo kind of went out there and everything. So now it seems like people that said years ago, and I'm the type of person, I don't really listen to high school recruiters or stuff like that, but they talked about LaMelo being the best of the 3 Ball children. And if that's the case, the Hornets have themselves essentially what they were hoping, which is to have somebody fall into their laps, get lucky, have somebody fall into your lap and kind of develop here in this market, because as we know, people aren't flocking here. It's a great place to live for your family. It's great weather, as we know, but in terms of the NBA market, it's still relatively small, and free agents and the big name players want to go to these bigger markets where it's surrounded by water and stuff like that. So to have LaMelo here and see what he's done just so far, as you said, traction-wise, in terms of just his following and the amount of people who want to just see what he does and what he says every day, it's incredible, man. And we're only a month in. Imagine, he had his best game as a quote-unquote pro last night with 18 points. A couple nights ago in Orlando. One of those things where you see his game develop, and you're right. This is going to be exciting to just watch how he kind of extends from here over the next couple of months and years.
I know it is just the preseason and it's such a limited sample size, but to me, he's at least shown some guys you pick that high and that are a bit of a mystery, they can't do anything on the floor. He's at least shown that he belongs and maybe more importantly, feels like he belongs. He acts like it.
Definitely. And that's the thing too, is, unfortunately, because of COVID, normally we're able to see these guys in the gym for maybe 15, 20 minutes, then talk to them after practice. We haven't seen them in action other than these preseason games. So now that we actually have laid our eyeballs on him and what we're hearing, we can actually put to words, so to speak, and actually see what's happening out there on the floor. You're right. His intangibles are just incredible so far to see. His court vision is uncanny. He's very tall, like Magic Johnson-like, so that allows him to see the court probably better than maybe somebody 6'2" or 6'3". And then you can see just the confidence. Like once he gets his shot going, gets his offense going, he's going to be lights out because right now his passing is there, his defense is there. As we see, he can rebound as well, which start the fast break. His just overall just skill set just fits this team and his scheme so well because they want players to do multiple things. And he's able to do that. And to watch him just grow is going to be incredible.
Yeah, and I want to get to the things that need to grow with him in a second, but just to focus on what we know about him yet with this passing. I mean, for a 19-year-old Rod to make some of these passes, and we'll see what happens in the regular season, with the body control, with the decision-making, the way he puts guys in position, how special is that? I mean, put that into context for us. Not many guys can do that, and here we have a teenager doing it.
I agree. I mean, the pass he hit Miles Bridges with behind the back, on the run, fast break, it was one of those passes where it was like the right pass to do. Like it wasn't overly fancy. It wasn't flashy. It was like, you know what? I'll make this pass behind my back, right to my teammate, to my back on a dime. He's going to go up there and get us a nice two points. So to be able to see things like that, those intangibles at such a young age, you can see why players around him just say he's going to be something special because he asks questions, which sometimes rookies don't want to do because they're kind of scared. And you can see he wants to be coached, as James Borrego said. He wants to get better. So when you add all those things together, to be able to have a player like him in a market like this that needed so bad is just something that the Hornets and the NBA, to me, just got to be just thrilled about.
So let's talk about some of the aspects of his game that we know need to come along, and that's shooting and defense. We're taping this Friday morning after Saturday night. He went 4 of 8 from 3 and didn't have a great start in that game either, so he kept firing. What level does Lamelo Ball need to shoot at and play defense at to really become like a face of the franchise type guy?
That's a great question. I think in order for him to be that guy, you have to definitely be able to scare teams with your offense. You can pass the ball well. You can play decent defense. You know, you can do all these things that maybe people can't see per se in the box score all the time. But at the end of the day, in the NBA, for you to be able to be the best of the best, you got to be able to play both ends of the court. So playing defense is one thing, but you have to be able to go out there and score, not only score, but be aggressive. James Borrego has mentioned that so far, that he wanted him to go out there and be more aggressive. And we saw that. When he gets to the basket, it opens things up for everybody else. You know, you want to see him get to the cup because when he does that, the defense kind of comes to the paint. You have a Devante Graham, a Terry Rozier, a Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington, a Miles Bridges, those guys to dump the ball off to get them shots. It makes everybody's job out there easier. So I really believe that he's going to be like their engine this year. Like last year was Devante, and this year will be Devante to a certain extent because Devante is going to be the guy who's going to be their offensive weapon.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I feel like LaMelo's going to be their main engine. They're going to go as he goes, whether it's off the bench or eventually starting 5. He's going to have to come out there, set the tone right away to be able to have other guys behind him basically follow.
The thing to do a couple weeks ago in that brief free agency period was to just rip the Gordon Hayward deal. You know, 4 years, $130 million, and people made a lot of valid points, and smart basketball people made those points. What was your read on that?
It was something they had to do. Now, I know it's a lot of money, but as we talked about before in this market, it's unfortunate because you have a guy like Michael Jordan, who's one of the greatest players of all time. You know, we watched the documentary, back in the spring and just saw what a player he was behind the scenes. But now as an owner, he wants to win. Like you can tell losing is not something that's in his vocabulary, in his DNA. Like he wants to win. And the only way to get these players in here right now is to basically give them more money than probably their quote unquote worth. But at the end of the day, it sometimes gets a little bit annoying when you hear people say, oh, he overpaid for this guy. He overpaid for that guy. Well, it's not your money, man. It's Michael Jordan. You know what I mean? So if he feels comfortable paying him that amount of money, then who are we to kind of complain about what he did? Now, you want to say, is he worth it? it's two different things, of course, but again, we don't know until the contract is actually, completed. Maybe Gordon Hayward coming here and getting paid $30 million a year for his quote unquote on the court work may look like it's overvalued, but he may bring people into the stands. He may sell merchandise for you. He may get better TV rights for you. So when you see those things happening, you got to say, you know what, if they pay this man's money, just let it be. It was definitely surprising. The NBA.com survey came out today for GMs that was polled anonymously. They said essentially they was surprised. That was, I think, the highest rated move of the offseason so far in terms of this surprise rate. So it was definitely not something that we expected, but you got to give Michael Jordan and Mitch Kupchak credit. When Gordon Hayward even gave him the inkling about him wanting to come here, they found a way to make it happen. And the other end result was it somehow, even though he got stretched, it helped get the contract of Nick Batum off the books, which, as we know, fans for years have just been up in arms about Nick Batum's play this contract. So if those things all kind of come together, you look at it as a whole, he got his money, yeah, but long term, it may help Charlotte to actually get to where they're trying to get to franchise-wise.
Yeah, they closed that deal quick, and my thought is, like, I would rather ride out Nick Batum's contract and get him off the bench at $9 million a year for 3 years than have him just sit there and collect DNPs all year for $27 million. And with Hayward, I mean, like, and others have brought this up, it is the NBA. It's a players' league. Like, next year when the Hornets have, $27, $29 million, they're going to offer it to a player, and they're going to say, like, well, who else you got? And Gordon Hayward, if he's good, certainly fits that. So more with Hayward, I mean, we know he's got to stay healthy. I mean, that's a given. But, like, how much of what the Hornets want to do this season and even going into the next couple of years rests on him returning to as close to that all-star form?
I think a lot. It seems like we talked about Lamelo, a few minutes ago. It seems like Gordon Hayward is like at least number 1 or 1A, right, with Lamelo, because the Hornets want to play through Gordon Hayward and Lamelo. They played through Devante a lot last year. He was their guy, but now when you have Devante, when you have Terry Rozier, when you have Lamelo, when you have Gordon Hayward, they want to be able to take these players and make it difficult on the defense to be able to know where the ball's coming from and who's doing what out there on the floor. So with Gordon Hayward coming in here, he's definitely going to be the guy they play through probably the most. And he also has to be able to score the ball a little bit more than he did in Boston. That's probably the reason why he came here too. He wanted to be able to say, you know what, I can score the way I did in Utah. I want to be more of like the guy, not one of the guys. So for him, he has to come out here and get that all-star form going again. Because if he can do that, they're going to be a tough out each night. Because what you can get from Devante, which is about 20 plus a game, somewhere around there. Terry can give you about 20 a game. Mm-hmm. You can get 10 to 15 or so from PJ. Throw in Miles and Cody, it starts adding up. So to me, the Hornets have the offensive players to be able to get it done, but it's going to be all about who facilitates and who's able to get them to get the plays they want to get to on that side of the floor. So Gordon Hayward would be very important to me in my eyes for the Hornets this year.
Let's talk about a few other guys. Obviously, those are the two big focuses we want to spend a lot of time on. But, Devante Graham and Terry Rozier, they had the best 2 seasons of anybody on the team last year. I mean, does all this change help them? Does it hinder, like, their individual growth as players? What do you think?
I think it helps them because, obviously, when you're a young player and the focus is on you and you get through it, it helps you out because you knew the defense is focused on pretty much stopping you, and you were able to kind of go out there and get that experience of what it's like to be the guy. Now, they can't just focus on you. They can't just focus on Devante. Can't just focus on Terry Rozier. If you do that at some point, the other guys on the floor are going to be able to help the Hornets score the points and possibly beat you out there. So, to me, when you add those guys, they're going to take, quote-unquote, minutes a little bit from somebody else. Probably you got to figure out the right people on the floor combination-wise. But when it comes to helping your game ascend, to me, those new additions are only going to help. I mean, we've seen so far the connection between Lamelo and, like, Miles Bridges. I mean, those guys have a synergy right now that's just kind of nice to see for people who have been together for just only a month or so. Imagine in March or April when they've been on the floor for hundreds of minutes together, and they know exactly what they're going to do before they even get to that point on the court. So I definitely think the new additions are going to help out. The Terry Rozier, the Devante Graham. It's going to be more now about just how they can all fit in, how they can all fit in cohesively.
I meant to ask you this about Lamelo, so real quick, when's a good timeline for him to maybe start? I mean, does it even happen this year? I mean, he like you said, him and Bridges coming off the bench, that's something they haven't had in a long time.
That's a really good question. That's another good problem to have if you're James Borrego. I think at some point Lamelo will start. I think it just depends all just about how the team is going, like ebb and flow. Are they winning one game and then losing two? Are they winning three and then losing one? It kind of depends on how things are flowing. But I can see after the first maybe couple of hiccups, if James Borrego says, you know what, we're starting games off well, we're not coming off the opening tip the way I want to put LaMelo in there off gate and have his energy from the opening tip. I can see that happening. I would say it probably will happen sometime before the All-Star break, but I don't think it's going to happen right away. I think you want to get the guy comfortable on the floor, see what he has to offer, and make sure you don't just hand the keys to him. Because if you do, the veterans are going to say, wait a minute, I busted my you-know-what last year, and I didn't get my chance until you trusted me. So for LaMelo, it's all about coming out there and just doing his job and just doing what they ask him to do on a night in, night out basis. I think they'll be okay if that happens.
Yeah, and credit to him. I mean, a 19-year-old coming in with all this like name recognition, he seems cool with that. I mean, he seems perfectly fine with that, which is kind of refreshing. I'll pair these two guys together. We talked a little bit of Miles Bridges and PJ Washington. What do you envision for those guys this year?
That's a good question, man. Those guys are going to be really key too this year too, because they're like the underliers, meaning like they are players we kind of know what they can do for the Hornets, but it's going to be all about how they're used and what combo they're with on the floor. I think PJ, the stretch five, is going to be something we're going to see a lot of this year. You know, JB has talked a lot about that, about him wanting to see PJ play a center position and have Miles play a lot of four. So with those guys on the floor together, they're going to be small. My only question is, when you put the lineup on the floor, can you rebound the ball the way you want to? Can you essentially close out things on defense, possessions on defense the way you want to, and make sure that you're getting the ball off the floor? Because we already know they're going to be able to go up and down the court fast pace-wise with that lineup. It's more about, can you hold serve if they're putting in guys who are bigger, who are 7 feet, 6'10", at those spots against you. If they can do that, they'll be okay. But I've seen so far from Miles just this more of an intensity. You can see he's like a little bit more locked in. I remember asking him this week, we talked to him, just you know, what's happening with him right now. He just says things have slowed down for him. He's not sure if it's just because it's preseason, because what's happening, but the game has slowed down for him. And so if that happens, you see PJ Washington kind of up his game a little bit, then I think they'll be okay.
Going to hold on to you for a few more minutes, Rod, and ask you about Malik Monk. This is obviously a big year for him. Suspended for that stretch last year while he started to come on strong. Got the COVID, you know, that's done with. He spent the time in isolation. Hopefully it doesn't hurt him too much going forward. He's just one of those players where it's like he's not who they drafted him to be, but he's kind of finding something in himself at this point.
Yes, and he's an X factor for the Hornets. I mean, he's probably, if you ask me right now, he's probably on the outside, rotation-wise, looking in, because you have Jalen McDaniels, you have the Martin twins. Like, those guys right now are ahead of him in the rotation because of what they bring defensively and their length and their two-way play. So, but with Malik, he can score, as we've seen. He can give you 20 points in a second off the bench, which is hard to do in the NBA. So if he could just stay focused, keep his head on straight, and be ready when they call him, he could definitely have himself a good year. Because at some point, you know how it is, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be one of those weird years where we're not sure what's going to happen in terms of guys getting tested positive for COVID, going on these lists. So if you test positive and you can't play, next man up mentality. Also you have a shortened preseason, so you might have injuries happen a little more frequently this year. So Malik's chance will come. For him, it's about being ready when that chance comes and seizing the opportunity, because he said he's matured a little bit. He said he's had time to ponder what he's done wrong and kind of just where he should be. So if he come out there and just score the ball the way we know he can, and not try to do too much when he's out there, then he can definitely be a player for this team that they can use somewhere down the line.
I'm going to be selfish how I ask this question, because I want to know who the most intriguing guy we haven't really talked about on the roster is, and why is it Jalen McDaniels?
You know what? I was just going to say he probably is the guy, and I think we haven't talked about him a lot because he's really quiet.
Yeah.
And he doesn't make a lot of noise out there on the court, which is a good thing. He's a player just sliding and say, you know what, man, go out here, just play hard, hustle, and just take the shot when it's there. And we talked to him as well this preseason, and he mentioned he just is comfortable now because he feels like he belongs. And when you feel like you belong anywhere in life, whether you have a new job, whether it's your kids going to school, a new school, whatever it may be, when you feel like you belong, then that's when you get comfortable and say, you know what, I can do whatever these guys right here are doing. So he feels like that right now. And he's one of those players who, if he can just make sure he hits a three-point shot, he's going to be really hard to guard because he can play good defense. He's very long. He can get to the basket because of his length as well. So if he can hit the three-point shot when it's there wide open for him, again, his minutes are only going to increase, because when you have that kind of length, versatility, athleticism, the coaching staff wants to find ways to kind of put you on the floor. So for him, he's going to have probably, to me, a great second year because he knows now what to do and where he has to be out there on the court.
All right, Rod, I'm going to close you out with this because I know we're about to jump on a Hornets Zoom. I'll see you in another Zoom room in about 10 minutes. But what is the next big move for Mitch Kupchak with this team, and does it happen this season?
Great question, man. I think the next big move, honestly, is to resist the urge to get that bad contract to come in here. Because as you said, teams right now probably still want to say, you know what, let me see what I got for a month or so. Okay, this doesn't work for my team. Let me move this player. And the Hornets have a little bit of cap space even right now to take on a contract. So if I'm Mitch Kupchak, I don't want to get ahead of myself. You essentially did a good draft by bringing in players who you feel could help you long term. You got your best prize free agent ever in terms of bringing Gordon Hayward in here. So now just don't mess it up. You're going to have $7 million of cap space next year, when everybody will have cap space as well. But it still gives you flexibility to go out there and be a player for a multiple team, 3 or 4 team trade in the summertime. So if I'm Mitch Kupchak, just stand pat, resist the urge to do anything dramatic, and just see what you got, and then reassess things come June and July, because the team has the core pieces there right now. It's more about that one more play to kind of put him over the top per se. So if he can just not quote unquote mess it up, then the Hornets right now, to me, are in the kind of shape that you want to be in terms of making sure you're heading in the right direction long term.
Yeah, just because you got that money doesn't mean it has to burn the hole in your pocket, right?
Don't let it do it, man. My mom will always say, don't get that money, let it burn a hole in your pocket. Save it for a little bit. So Mitch Kupchak better save his money for a couple of months here, man.
All right, you can find him at Rod Boone on Twitter and the boondocks.substack.com. It's required reading now for Hornets fans. Rod, thank you so much, and I will see you in that Zoom room with Coach Borrego soon.
You got it. Anytime, Nick. Thanks for having me, buddy. All
right, make sure sure you subscribe to Rod's newsletter, and if you can, subscribe or follow this podcast however you're watching or listening, whether that's subscribing on YouTube or following on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, whatever you can do. We really appreciate it. That is it for another edition of WCNC's Off the Clock with Carboni podcast. We'll see you next time.